Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the podcast. A very special guest I have on the show today. You may have heard of him before. We haven't heard from him in a while. He's John McIntyre. He started this podcast, and he's back on the show, and he's got some very interesting things to say. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you, brother. It's always fun when you're on the show. We always have a good time. And something we're going to talk about today, I think, is very important because this affects a lot of people, not just, of course, in the marketing game, but in all aspects of life, all walks of life. And this has been a journey that sort of you have been on for a couple of years. And so I'm just going to let you take it away. You tell us what you've been up to and what you have discovered.
Oh, yeah, man. Where to start? So yeah, I emailed you because I was like, let's do a podcast on something that no one's really talking about. Everyone's talking about funnels, copywriting, like especially on this podcast, it's all about emails and copywriting and freelancing, how to get clients, things like that. But what I've been on my own journey over the last years is this sort of journey of, I don't really want to call it a spiritual journey just because that word's so loaded right now. And like it always has been. No one really knows exactly what that means, or it means something different to different people. But that's sort of what it's been like going through this process of learning to work with my own emotions to the point where instead of using things like, self-help, like positive thinking, like learning how to actually go directly to certain feelings without thinking about them and dissolve them. And the benefits of this are really big, which we can get into. But my process or my sort of path on this started back in 2015 when I was in Colombia. I just come off an event on Richard Branson's island, invite-only sort of business mastermind thing with a bunch of people. And life was really good. I was in Colombia. I was making money. We had like this penthouse apartment in like one of the nicest areas of town, like sick view, like really great life.
Right.
In a lot of ways on the outside, but I wouldn't say I was depressed. Like I wasn't on medication or anything like that, but I wasn't happy. Mm-hmm. I was. I was constantly bouncing from project to project, really looking, I think, for a sense of, my thing at that time was looking for a sense of meaning and purpose. And, I was trying to solve the whole problem logically, like, probably a lot of people who are, who listen to this show or especially guys when they get into marketing and business, we want to throw our brain at problems. And, if we do that, then we think that that's going to solve it. And that was what I was trying to do. But it wasn't until, and that sort of, took me in circles, and even meditation didn't work. That took me in circles for 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And what's totally changed things, the whole game changer for me was learning to, as weird as this sounds, learning to feel my feelings.
Wow. That's an interesting sort of statement because that's something, of course, everyone, and maybe this applies more so to males and less to females perhaps, but you're sort of told, of course, to suppress and push down your feelings your whole life. And so I think this is what leads people certainly to these moments where they sort of have an epiphany, maybe that that's not the most healthy and thing to do,
Right. I mean, we can talk about how, but first, like, I think it'd be good to just touch on like why even bother with this? Like, that's why, because basically I've launched a business in this area. I'm working with entrepreneurs to help them develop this ability to feel their feelings. And one challenge that I've had is like how to communicate it. Like why is this important? Because a lot of people are like, well, I don't care. Like, I just want to make more money and have some more time. Like, they're just the typical stuff. And the reason I think this is so important, and the reason I found it to be so transformative, is through this process of learning how to feel my feelings. We can get into what that means in a second, but through doing that, I feel like it is like taking my performance in every single area of my life to like a whole new level. Like it's and instead of getting like the high performance from like working harder or being more stressed or effort and grit and hustle and grind and sort of the negative aspect of things, it's coming from a sense of flow or a sense of like effortlessness. It's almost like I'm in this place right now where like just getting these great results in different areas, not just business, but with have a great relationship in the gym, with my family, these different things that that we all have that are part of our lives. Like, it's almost like I don't even have to try to get, this sounds weird to even say this, but it's like not even having to try to get good results. It just sort of automatically happens. What you do is once you get out of your own way, it's like doing it the right way or getting the result that you want is sort of like automatic. And so that's my answer when people say, like, why should I care, right? Like, what's in it for you? What's in it for you to figure out how to deal with your emotions properly beyond what you get in most like self-help programs that are around today is way better performance with, less time, less stress, less effort. So you end up being able to have more money, more time, but also more happiness. So to me, that, otherwise, the alternative is to be one of those guys who, and I met tons of people like this, get into business, they hustle their asses off, they make millions of dollars, but they're miserable.
Right.
And it's like, who would you rather be?
Yeah, people have heard that story. I'm sure if you go back in various podcasts on this very podcast, you hear people with that exact story. I remember Justin Goff, who we had on the show, had a very similar story. He's gone on to be very successful, but still felt like he wasn't enough, even though he sold a company for like $20 million and stuff. So this is very important because people are sort of reticent to talk about this stuff. It's not the most popular topic because people are loath to admit perhaps what seems like maybe a weakness, but these things are happening all the time, and these are a roadblock to really what most people are seeking. And that's something you have found out personally, John, as you have transcended that sort of process. Take us down that road. Like, how did you sort of stumble onto this stuff? You knew you sort of had an impasse perhaps, and where did you go?
Well, for a while, I didn't really go anywhere. I like I said, I was going in circles. I've been meditating since 2010, I think. And there were aspects of different things I'd done, like positive thinking, like, visualization. These different things do work. But to me, they kind of scratch the surface, because what we've really got is, as we go through lives, we have these experiences. A lot of them happen in early childhood. We have these experiences. They're very, very hard. They can be very traumatic. It could be like full-blown traumatic, like, child abuse or something. Mm-hmm. It could also be that you call out to mommy or daddy and they don't come, and you feel like they hate you or something like that. Like, not intellectually that you get that, but you might basically get the emotional feeling in that moment of like being unloved, and then you end up storing that inside yourself. And because you're so young, you don't really know how to process it or let it go. So what happens is that emotional energy gets locked inside your sort of psyche or your whole state of being. And this is what drives people later in life. This is why people have, some people have daddy issues, some people have mommy issues, some people have we have these patterns that we can't get out of, that we respond to love in certain ways, we respond to money in certain ways. We have these automatic patterns of behavior. And this is what happens, right? Like, someone goes, great, I feel insecure when I don't have money because of some kind of, early childhood experience that they might not even have identified. All they know is that they feel insecure, when they don't have money. It's like, great. This isn't even all, doesn't even necessarily have to be a conscious process, but they'll just find themselves automatically desiring more money, because unconsciously they perceive that, lack of money equals, unhappiness or not being loved or something like that. So they go and make a whole bunch of money in the hope that it's going to make them feel loved. But what they didn't realize is the whole reason they didn't, like, it's almost like world's a mirror. And it's like the problem was in the first place that they already felt unloved. And then they tried to fill that with, fill that hole with money, when what they needed to do is just let go of the part of them that let go of that energy in them that made them feel unloved. That's all they needed to do. But instead, they spent 20 years building this big company and making all this money. So what I realized was in 2015, while I was going through my process of, like I said, being kind of like having a great life on the outside, but just not being very happy, not being satisfied, pretty unfulfilled. And the fact that life was really good on the outside at the same time as that kind of made it worse, because when you're sort of when you're broke, whatever, and miserable, at least you can blame it on the situation. But when you're successful and you've got this stuff going on and you're still unhappy, it kind of, I think in some ways it can feel worse, because you don't have any excuses at that point. You're like, I did what the world told me to do, but I'm not there yet. Right. I don't have that feeling. And, for me, like I could, I was able to sort of fast forward and realize that if this is how I feel right now, going and spending 10 years on this, trying to make this money is not going to fix the problem. I need to figure out, like, there's going to be another way. I'm not going to waste the next 10 years, going in circles like this and make, I might make $100 million. But if I still feel how I feel right now, as in back in 2015, I'd feel like it was the whole waste of time. So, it's a long story in terms of how it all went down, but a few different conversations, a few different books took me down this path of, learning. The basic technique was like learning how to feel my feelings unconditionally, which is what I mentioned before. And what that means, because it's a little bit hard to define. When most people think about feeling their feelings, they'll think, oh, I'm feeling a bit angry right now. I'm feeling a bit sad, or I'm feeling a bit depressed, or I'm feeling a bit anxious, or a bit whatever it is. They are feeling happy. And what they're doing is, a feeling is a feeling. It's not a word. It's kind of like eating a pizza is an experience that you have. Like if you had never eaten pizza before and you tried to describe what it was like to eat a pizza to someone who never, or someone tried to describe what it was like to eat a pizza to you and you never had one before, you would have no idea what it was like to eat an actual pizza and bite down into the pepperoni and the cheese and the oil and the crispy crust and blah, blah, blah. They could describe it to you, but you would never have had that satisfying sense of, biting into that pizza. And so with feelings, that's what I mean by feeling your feelings. Like, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm angry. But what happens is, especially in the West, and I don't know whether guys are any worse at this than girls. Maybe they are. Maybe girls are intuitively better at it. But then women still tend to do the whole thing of like, we're one step removed from our feelings. So instead of actually feeling our anger as a sensation within the body, we say, oh, I feel angry. And then we start thinking, why do I feel angry? And we end up spending all this time in the mental realm inside our head, rather than engaging with the feeling the same way we would engage with a pizza, which is to eat the pizza and taste it, not to think about it.
Right. So it's like we intellectualize it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like, we intellectualize it. And the problem with that, the reason that's an issue is because once you intellectualize it, you're not really feeling it. And this is the classic thing. I think what happens is, we have these uncomfortable feelings that pop up and come up during our life. Let's say I have this thing from early childhood, right? Something from a long, long, long time ago. What happens in life is life happens, shit goes wrong. It presses or basically reminds us of that feeling. It basically reflects our own unintegrated emotional energy back at us. This is why, like, some people get triggered by certain situations and other people don't. Same situation, but it triggers certain people. And that's because it's not because there's anything wrong with the situation. Otherwise, it would trigger everyone the same way, right? It's not the situation that's the problem. It's the emotional energy that they've got inside them that they don't know how to release. And so this is the mistake that people make. They think that the problem is the situation. And so they spend the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years trying to fix the situation. But they don't realize that the situation is just reflecting back at them what they are. And so the solution is not to change the mirror. Like, it's sort of like, this is be the equivalent of like looking in the mirror and seeing a, fat, fat, overweight, whatever, and then trying to rub the mirror out. That's what most people try and do with their life, right? All the situations that they're faced with that supposedly make them feel insecure and worried and stressed are actually just reflecting back at them the stress, the fear, the worry, the sense of being unloved that they have, inside them. So anyway, to bring it back to results, because I know that some people are going to be listening to this thinking, like, that's great, but how do I make more money? The thing I've found is that if you spend your business career or copywriting career, since it's a copywriting podcast, if you spend that basically reacting to your own emotional bullshit, for lack of a better way to put it, you never end up thinking as big as you could think. You never end up being, betting on yourself in the way that you could if you weren't coming at it from that point of view. And like I found in my own life with my relationships, with the gym, with business, my results have improved because I'm not coming at it from an emotional perspective anywhere near as much as I used to. Right. And so there are real, tangible performance benefits to learning how to do this.
That sounds great. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Is like giving people, it sounds like you've had this sort of awakening where you realized that you were doing this and that it was an obstacle for you. And then you decided to find out how to remove it. So what are some simple steps people can take to sort of start going down this path? I mean, you've been on this path now. This is 2018. So this is 3 years later. What were some of the first simple steps you took to try to get out of this or over this obstacle?
The first thing, the main technique is it's really simple, but it's not easy. And that was like we're saying, to feel your feelings. Right. Because the reason, let's say someone has some emotional energy from their childhood that they have stored away and they don't know how to release. The way you release it is not by going and trying to fix the mirror. The way you release it is by feeling it. Right. It's a bit like, we can, there's a few different metaphors I've been playing with. You've got emotional cancer, be one way to think about it. That sort of, to me, that gets at the gravity of the situation. Because if you don't fix this is when you go and, spend the next 20 years of your life doing something. And then one day you realize, what the hell was all that for? So to me, it's a very, very serious problem. And what we need to do, what people need to do to fix it, and avoid wasting the next 20 years is performing what you could call emotional surgery on the emotional cancer. And the way you do that is not by running away from the feeling, not by what most people do. An example of this would be a couple in a relationship, they have a topic, maybe that's just a hot button topic for one of them. And so every time it comes up, they always argue. And so eventually one of them's just look, let's just not talk about this. It's too painful. Maybe someone died. Maybe it was some experience I had back in the day. And so what's happened is that conversation is triggering one of them or both of them. And the way to resolve that situation is for them to both engage, to basically perform emotional surgery on that hot button, on that trigger. But what they do instead is that they're like, let's just not talk about it. Let's just try and build a life where that trigger never gets touched. And so what happens is the emotional cancer gets locked in there. Like it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets buried, and it doesn't get buried forever. What happens is, it's only buried until the mother-in-law comes around and then says something that sets the whole thing off again. Mm-hmm. And so in business, this would work out that like if you have a thing that where you're really afraid of being poor, and then so what you do is you go and make a whole bunch of money, so you don't so you don't feel poor, or you don't feel whatever you feel, get stuck in that place. Mm-hmm. You haven't actually dealt with the problem. You just built this nice little house over the top so it never gets touched.
Right.
The cancer is still in there. And that's what will, in the long term, will kill the results in your performance. It, ruins relationships. It ruins businesses. It'll ruins lives. Or you can go and engage with that on this, by feeling it unconditionally, which is what that does is it's almost like you're allowing the emotional steam to come out, not by expressing it in a violent way or anything like that, but by feeling it. It's almost like that. That's all it wants to do. This is what I found in my experience is this emotional energy. All it wants to do is be felt, and not felt in a thinking way, like, oh, I'm feeling angry, but to feel it, like to taste it like it's a pizza, to really just engage with it and feel it as a sensation within the body, and to do that every single time. And as you do that, the trigger will gradually dissolve. And then one day you'll realize that it's not there anymore.
That's very interesting. I think I said this to you before, but I saw a movie or a documentary here recently about work they'd done with prisoners, where they brought in people from the outside, like, civilians, and they did group therapy. And this was basically the technique that you're describing, I think, because they had, these prisoners, of course, are even harder core in this regard of suppressing their feelings and certainly not showing any emotion while they're in prison. And this was like a safe environment. And you saw these hardened criminals who are like some of the scariest, people looking you've ever seen. And then just, that's what they were getting them to do, just feel those feelings. And man, they were just like so emotive and stuff, they're just breaking down and finally allowed to, in some cases it was grieving. In some cases it was just this lack of love from their past, like you're talking about. So, this is like such a widespread issue, I feel, because I certainly know I've encountered it not only myself, but in other people. And so what sort of resources did you encounter? I know you've started a whole company around this now, John, and you're trying to get this out to people and help them. What were sort of the first resources you sort of tapped into that sort of set you on this path?
The book that did it all for me, man, was The Presence Process. Yeah, that was what started it all. It's a 10-week, sort of like meditation, but a bit different. Okay. And it teaches you this basic skill of how to feel your feelings, and it's not really geared towards business, and the language is this is why I wanted to get into this game, into the space. Because it's so much fluffy woo, like stuff that,
right?
I can, like that book, for example. Like I really appreciate how it's written, but I can, I've already tried to give it to a lot of people who just never end up reading it, because it's not that it's fluffy. It's just that the guy uses a lot of words that if your personality is not wired in a certain way, I think it either goes straight over your head or you just don't like it. Like it pushes all the wrong buttons. That would be a book worth checking out. But yeah, like I said, it works. I think it worked great if you do it. It's just that a lot of people have give up on it, which is a bit sad.
Right.
Another book is The Untethered Soul, which is sort of in the same vein, but it's not really, there's no 10-week process or anything like that. It's more just a bunch of different concepts. And each chapter is, it just has some cool ideas in there. So, that's and awesome. Really, man, I mean, the like you can do this anytime. Like this whole, like what we talked about here, like feeling your feelings, like it starts like right now. Like whatever whatever someone is feeling in their life, whatever the situation is, this journey, this path, is about, instead of trying to run away from that or to avoid that, it's almost like to just to face it, and to feel whatever. Like if you're in a really if they're listening to this and they're super stressed out, or something's hard's happening in the family, or they're running out of money in some way, whatever it is, just feel it. Like feel how that situation is coming in and pressing your buttons, and don't do anything about it. Not straight away or anything like that. Just start to pay attention to how so far up until now life has been coming in to your psyche and your consciousness, and it has been pressing all these buttons, and you've been spending however many years or decades trying to avoid it doing that. And this is why you mentioned before, like there's this culture, especially around guys, I think, of like, don't be emotional, don't feel your emotions. But dude, like you want to like test, like you want to see if you have balls, like see if you can go and like feel what you're feeling. Like, see if you can allow life to come in and press all of your hot buttons, all your triggers, all your pain points, all that shit that you didn't deal with when you were 5 years old, whatever, and see if you can feel that without flinching. See how long you last before you go, give up, or you go and look for alcohol, or you go and look for food, or you go and look for money, you go and look for sex, you go and look for something to distract yourself. And like that to me is like, if like that takes real courage. And so that's my challenge to people is like, yeah, you think you're tough, like go down this path and see how far you get.
Yeah, I think that's probably I don't know enough about this process and sort of how we end up this way, but it strikes me just intuitively that, the way the culture's is set up, certainly, seems like where you're from and in North America, where I'm from, there is this like culture of suppression, and you're sort of told not to be, certainly as a guy, I have a lot of friends that I can immediately jump to mind, who are told, been told to suppress their feelings, or it's not manly or whatever, to feel your feelings. I saw a thing not so long ago too, where they had like high school boys that they talked to, and they were talked to sort of anonymously, like they were brought into sequestered and talked about what they were feeling. And their fathers were watching across, the two-way mirror. And they had this dialogue with this researcher and or psychologist, and they're allowed to be, to emote and say what they really thought. And their fathers were shocked, how emotional these young boys were and stuff when they finally were able to had a safe place to let that out. So it's a fascinating subject, and I think it is like extremely widespread. And I think it doesn't really, we're talking about this in a business and marketing podcast, but I mean, I think it equally affects people on all strata, and as an obstacle for virtually, I don't know if everybody, because there's people obviously who have moved past this, but certainly a lot more widespread than you'd probably think.
Well, I think the whole world, like it's not, I think what who I personally want to work with is entrepreneurs,
right.
But dude, everyone's doing this. Like everyone's engaged in this, this emotional suppression behavior. I didn't call it that. I wasn't really taught to suppress my emotions, but I didn't grow up in a culture where like no one taught me to this whole feel your feelings thing. Like you don't go through
right.
school and learn like what emotions are, like, or what this energy is, and how you don't get any sort of psychological lessons like in high school. Right. Whereas I think some of these techniques, why don't they teach something like, say, mindfulness or meditation or these different things in high school? Because we are all emotional. These are a huge part of our lives. Yet, because what I've wondered, I don't have kids right now, but I've already started to think what would happen if I taught if I had a boy or a girl or a bunch, whatever, and I taught them this stuff as soon as they were old enough to just think, 3 or 4 or 5 years old. You start teaching them simple things like how to breathe, how to slow down and control their arousal rate. Arousal mean the heart rate, not their arousal. That'd be weird. But yeah, you imagine learning this stuff at 3, 4, or 5. If you could teach someone that, like a kid that, I wonder how different they would grow up, because they would be far less reactive than most people are. The other side point to this, I just thought of is a lot of people who listen to this, who are into self-help and personal development, you hear about, positive thinking and gratitude and, visualization, these different techniques and tools. And what we're trying to do with these techniques is change the mental programming in the brain, how it works, how it thinks, how it does all these different things. And you're coming at it from a mental perspective, right? The problem is maybe you're a little bit negative, or maybe you don't, you think about sales calls, for example, or a business you're going to start, you're constantly thinking about how it's going to fail. And so going and doing positive thinking and visualization is one way to, reprogram your mind for success. So that's how they talk about it, right? Which I think I mentioned before, it does work, but the issue is that that's a mental tool and you're trying to engage with the thought, but you might think, well, where did the negative thought come from? If someone had the negative thought of I'm never going to be successful in this business, or it's going to break, it's going to fail, I'm going to go bankrupt, all these different things. The idea is that all these different techniques are coming at the problem from a mental level. We've got these negative thoughts, and so we're trying to replace them with positive thoughts. And what happens is it kind of works, I think, but it doesn't really work that well. And the reason for that is no one really talks about where are those thoughts coming from? Why do we have a mode of being negative in the first place? Why do we expect to fail? Why do some people expect to fail and some people don't naturally?
Right.
And so it's kind of instead of trying to replace negative thoughts with positive ones, why not remove the thing that's driving the negative thoughts? If you can take that out, you might remove 90% of all that negative stuff anyway, 100% of it. And then your positive thinking is going to be 100 times more effective.
Right.
Because it's, you're not trying to crowd out negative thoughts with positive thoughts. You've just got kind of emptiness and peace inside. And now when you slot in positivity and gratitude, it sticks 100 times more. And like I'm not just saying that intellectually. That's what I've been finding in my life is like I got into, I started the business and the copywriting and all that 6, 7, 8 years ago. And, I've been into personal development and all of that. And I've done it, it worked to, varying degrees. But then I went down this emotional path of learning how to feel through these feelings and let them go. And now I'm coming back to all the, visualization and positive thinking. And the amazing thing is it's so much more effective now.
Right.
Because it's like once you know how to clear out the emotional stuff underneath that's driving the negativity, that's driving the thoughts of like, what if this doesn't work, or these sorts of things, it becomes so much easier to stay attuned to your vision.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's like you remove this, whatever it is, you remove this mass out of you to freeze you now to be able to accept, those techniques which change your mind and your state through the intellectual process.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So this is kind of like you reporting back, of course, now, because you're going through this process. I've gone through this process. And you're sort of reporting back and trying to get this information out there. And as a result, you started this company. So what sort of help are you providing people through your new endeavor?
Yeah. So it's called That Which Is Aware. And the idea is that, beneath the thoughts, beneath all these different things inside your head, these conscious things, there is let's not call it a spirit, but it's some kind of awareness, some kind of thing, this deeper knowing, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, that's bigger and larger. And because, we've all had those moments of going into a flow state where your mind stops and you're still there.
Right.
And so it's like, what is that thing, or who is that thing that's still there? And so, to me, that is the power. That is what I'm trying to tap into, what I want to help other people to tap into. So the company's called That Which Is Aware, the website, thatwhichisaware.com.
Okay.
And right now it's early stages. You can sign up. There's a free webinar training there on how to 10x your peace of mind, productivity, and profit, which, basically just covers some of what we've talked about here today, just in more detail how to do it. And then if that's interesting or compelling, at the end they can there's a link to book a phone call and doing basically like a free phone call with people where I help them figure out where they're stuck emotionally and give them some tools and some techniques, some strategies for getting through it.
So do you recommend that people go through they get a hold of this? It was called the presence process, if I remember.
Yeah, I would say it depends. Like if go check out the presence process. Like I said, the language won't appeal to everyone. Mm-hmm. The Untethered Soul is another good one. Again, it's one of those books that some people love it, a lot of people hate it. If people are looking for maybe a more contemporary version or something that's less fluffy, that's what I'm trying to do. Is trying to take these concepts that have previously been sort of very hard to understand, very hard to teach, and I want to simplify them. I'm a copywriter, right? So I want to take this shit that I think is so valuable and so transformative, but usually communicated very, very poorly, and put it into a way, approach it like a copywriter, thinking, how do I put this in the most simple, straightforward, easy to understand way? So if people want that, then the best thing they could do would be to go to the site, thatwhichisaware.com, and sign up for the webinar.
Awesome. Well, it's been great having you on the show, man. This is a very powerful topic that I think, if people are going to listen to this, it's going to immediately resonate with, the vast, if not all the people listening to this. And I really want to thank you for bringing this stuff to people's attention, because I think it is such a powerful message.
No worries, man. It's been good to talk about. I mean, it's the hard thing for me. The challenging thing so far has been that it's difficult. Like, I think this stuff is so incredibly valuable, not just for let's all be happy and just be happy, live happy lives, because I think this is what the world needs, more people who are like this, because it does increase performance, and it does it does take your groups and cultures and things like that all to the next level. So I think that, I really do believe that it's what the world needs. And so the challenge now is getting as many people on board as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you listen to this and you think this is something you want to delve into, it's thatwhichisaware.com. John, it's been a pleasure having you come back to the show and deliver this message, this journey that you've been on. And I think it's just fantastic. And I'm definitely going to pick up that book and watch the webinar and so forth myself.
Awesome, dude. Been a pleasure.
Awesome. And for everybody else, we'll be back again, hopefully with something as exciting and as purposeful as what John's just delivered here today. Always a pleasure to have John jump back on the show, and we'll talk later.